to a sentence of time served.
Is there anywhere on earth where a man can still be free? Will he bear the weight alone, or will he have to bend the knee? Is there no one in this land who grows tired of the game, where the wicked gather stones and build up prisons in our name? There's a story that you've heard before. It's been told gentle soul misplaced inside a cage. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Free Ross. Whoa, whoa, whoa. An honest and philosopher, embattled by the steel of a sail designed to force all men to kneel. But he's patient and determined in his endless duel with time, in a sentence unbefitting of his crime. Will you bend your ear to listen? Will you turn your face to see the injustice staring back at you and me? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Free Ross. He stands in the present, looking back, he sees the boy he was is gone, and there's no pretending, living day to day in death he carries on. There's a fire inside that burns in you and me, and the truth denied is what will set him free. And the years go by like strangers in a dream, and the reasons why are more than what they seem. I'm awake tonight, and his spirit spoke to me. I can't be polite, said Ross, so break
I grew up in the U.S. and I see all these people like, yeah, nuke everybody in the Middle East and kill them all. And then they have the former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright on 60 Minutes, one of the most popular news shows in the U.S. And they asked her, they said, like, there's reports that more than 500,000 Iraqi children have died as a direct result of U.S. sanctions. And she looks back at her with a straight face and she goes, it was a really tough decision, but I think that it was worth it.
You know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Worth murdering 500,000 kids because of what the government did? And I apologize for crying, but it just disgusts me from my core when I see government people murdering people around the world. It's not just theoretical. These are real people with real lives. And Bitcoin has the power to undermine everything they're doing to people around the world. And I'm sorry for shouting, but it just disgusts me what these people in government do. And they do it through central banking and through the control of the money supply, and Bitcoin takes that away from them. I gotta stand.
VPN can spy on you. Not saying they are, not saying they would, but they can. That's the problem. That's just how they're built. VPNs run on trust. They toss around phrases like no logs, but what that really means is trust us. Trust us not to monitor, not to save, not to share. But here's the catch. In America, are we supposed to trust foreign companies in Israel, Romania, Panama, Switzerland to keep that promise? To not sell our data, to not cave under pressure, to not betray us if a government comes knocking? Can we really trust that? Maybe you can. But in a world drowning in surveillance, leaks, and hacks, we think that's insane. That's why we built something different. VP.net, the world's first verified privacy network. No more trusting companies, no more empty promises, just cryptographic proof in real time that we can't see your traffic, even if we wanted to, even if someone begged us to, even if a court ordered us to. All traffic runs inside Intel SGX secure enclaves, cryptographic vaults where not even we can peek inside. This isn't privacy by policy, it's privacy by design. It's a game changer. Once you know VP.net exists, you can't unsee it. You'll never look at VPN the same again, because your traffic belongs to you and no one else. VP.net, using a legacy VPN today, it's like using Hotmail.
Welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is Season 2, Episode 16. I hope you're all doing well. We've got a new setup today, so hopefully there won't be too many technical difficulties, but we have new audio, kind of a new mic, mixer, everything else. And so hoping everybody can hear this okay. If not, please let me know. The audio quality should be much better otherwise. And so with that said, we will jump right in. Today is a very exciting episode. I'm going to continue to talk about technocracy and the importance of privacy. A lot's going on in the last couple of weeks. I was at FreedomFest a couple of weeks ago, and then all last week was Porcfest, which I'll give an update on that. But clearly, technocracy is rising and an accelerated pace between Real ID and Palantir and backdoor CBDCs. It's very clear that the fight is on. And so it's critical that we focus on solutions that protect our privacy. And so today I'm going to have a special guest, Matt Kim, who is one of the co-founders of VP.net, which is an exciting new VPN. And as I will discuss later today, VPNs are critical, even with privacy coins. And so I'm going to discuss why they're important. I've actually started using VP.net myself, VP.net myself. You'll see rolling across the screen, the banner. There's a website, bit.ly/ARDVPNet. If you want to check out this new VPN, I encourage you to visit that link. But very excited about this interview and the opportunity to talk to Matt. If you had an opportunity, so I'm behind in terms of even uploading all the last 3 episodes of the podcast. Last week, instead of doing the podcast on Thursday, we did a live airing from Porcfest on Saturday night. And I had 3 interviews. I had Mark Edge up, which was great. And I look forward to doing a clip. Also Mark DeMeisel and Mark Passio, which was a very interesting conversation. You may recall last year I did an episode with Mark Passio and Michael Rechtenwald. And so this was kind of a continuation of that. So I'll be posting clips from those episodes, but I encourage you to check out episode 15 as well. I want to give an update on the events themselves. FreedomFest was, I definitely preferred Porcfest to FreedomFest. But by way of background, I used to be a sponsor of FreedomFest about 10 years ago, actually from like 2013 to 2015, through various organizations, whether it was the Free State Project or the Atlas Society was a sponsor of FreedomFest. And, typically the event was held in Las Vegas, where it was really good for networking because there was kind of a common area for people to meet up. This year, I guess they've alternated their agenda. And so now every other year is in Vegas, and then they pick some other location. And so this year it was in Palm Springs, which I will say was probably not the best location for a variety of reasons. It's difficult to get to, and even the venue itself was pretty spread out. So people were staying at 5 or 6 different hotels. So there really wasn't a big opportunity for social interaction. And even the exhibitor hall itself was so massive and so spread out that you actually didn't even get a huge opportunity to network or interact with other exhibitors. And so, from that perspective, it was a little bit disappointing. But nevertheless, it was great from the perspective of Ross Ulbricht's speech, which I recommend everyone check that one out. It was, I was in tears listening to him describe his situation in prison. And it was also a good opportunity to at least introduce some people to Roger Vere's situation, as well as talk about Zano and Freedom Dollar and the entire Zano ecosystem. So, all was not lost, but Porcfest really was a phenomenal event. As you know, if you've been listening to this podcast, for about 8 months, I've been planning to sponsor Porcfest. And what inspired me was, in 2012 to say 2014, if you were at Porcfest, you would run into people like Roger Ver, Eric Voorhees. I even met Vitalik before he started Ethereum. And the thing about Porcfest is it's not just a, weekend of talks or whatever, where you get some horrible chicken dinner. It's actually hands-on, experience where people are on a campground, and for an entire week, people are not just talking about liberty, they're living liberty. There's an area called Agora Valley, where people are buying and selling things using predominantly alternative currencies. And so, my vision for this was, in the last few years, there's been kind of a change. I mean, I think after the Bitcoin fork wars and everything else, people's interest in using cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange really dropped off, to the point where even the Free State Project itself stopped taking cryptocurrency for tickets for events. And so I thought, well, why don't we rekindle the original use case for crypto, but with an emphasis and a focus on privacy coins, and kind of learning from our mistakes, learning from what happened with the hijacking of Bitcoin, and getting back to our roots, which the whole point of using these alternative currencies was to separate money and state and to stop the war machine, which I thought it was really interesting that during this event, the U.S. bombed Iran. And so in any event, I co-sponsored the tent with Doug Tooman and Moneratopia, and it really went off phenomenally well, despite the fact that I wasn't able to be as prepared for it as I might have been because of FreedomFest the previous week. But we had a great tent. We had all kinds of talks. We had a panel about freeing Roger. That was one of the panels that had Sal on it, and Lynn Ulbricht, and also Angela McCardle from the LP. So that was a terrific panel. Lynn Ulbricht actually had a table in our tent, so she was in and out of our tent the entire week, which was incredible because on Saturday, Ross gave basically the main keynote of the entire event. So we had Lynn in our tent, not only distributing materials, but she was on a panel talking about her organization, Mothers Against Cruel Sentencing, and also talking about Ross as well, and the entire experience with finally prevailing and getting him free. And she also participated on the Free Roger panel. So that was truly fantastic. Steve Patterson showed up and was on a panel. We did a panel called "So Bitcoin Was Hijacked." So what? Now what are we going to do? And it was a really great conversation because the focus wasn't just on rehashing the contents of hijacking Bitcoin. And I think if you're listening to this, you're probably already familiar with the idea that Bitcoin was hijacked. If not, I encourage you to read the book Hijacking Bitcoin. But the short form of it is, we know it was hijacked. It was hijacked by people with ties to the deep state. It was hijacked by people with ties to traditional finance, as well as insiders that wanted to hobble Bitcoin for their own financial gain. And they used censorship and propaganda and divide and conquer as very effective strategies. So the real question, and when I spoke to Steve about it before we even kind of set in motion having a panel, the question is, okay, well, even though we know this, even though we know what happened to Bitcoin, can we prevent it from happening again? Because I see now the Liberty Movement and Agrists and ANCAPs and others are kind of rallying around privacy coins. There really is a lot of energy around that. But if the same tactics and techniques were used, would we be able to prevent the same fate that happened to Bitcoin? And so that was part of the conversation. And so I'll talk about some of my thoughts on that as we get further into the talk tonight. It was great. The Zano guys came out. There were three folks that came in from the Netherlands, Mr. Quibbs and his two colleagues. And it was great because they were actually going throughout Agora Valley and signing up merchants. So it was really great for them to experience firsthand what it's like to onboard a merchant, not only to Zano, but also to Freedom Dollar. And so I can't say enough about the event. I think it accomplished the main goal. Although when I originally set out to do this, my hope was that we would be celebrating Roger and Ian and Ross all being free. But I guess that's what we'll be celebrating next year. As I move on through this, I want to remind you guys that I've started writing for Agrist Cypher. So I encourage you to check out this newsletter. This is a phenomenal, it's a paid subscription service, but there are a half a dozen or so writers. It's Sal, the Agrist, me, John Bush, Brandon Aragon, and others that put together every month a short 1,000 or so word article, but it's action focused and focused on agorism. So actual steps that you can take in your life to exit the system and participate in counter economics. And so you can go to agristcypher.com. You can use my discount code Aaron5. Also, as a reminder, we still have our political prisoners out there. So if you haven't already, please sign the open letter in support of Roger Ver. You can see the QR code there, but if you're not watching and you're listening, you can go to freerogernow.org. Very important. We want to get as many signatures as possible. I know that Angela McArdle is working on a big campaign to try to lobby the administration to free all of our political prisoners. And Roger is near 100,000 signatures. So anything that you can do there to sign and share with your network, with your friends and your family throughout social media. If you have an email list, please email that link, freerogernow.org. Same thing with Ian Freeman. We want to continue to build some momentum for Ian. He's at freeiannow.org. So he needs more signatures on his petition as well. And by the way, outside of our tent, we had, banners for Roger and Ian, as well as for Lynn's organization. And lastly, Roman Storm. So go to freeromanstorm.com, I believe. Roman is facing 45 years in federal prison, and he has a trial coming up shortly in July. And it's unfortunately in the Southern District of New York. So Roman not only needs, our support in terms of signing whatever petition is out there, he's also looking to raise some additional funds for legal fees. I believe the Ethereum Foundation has offered to match up to $750,000. So I encourage you to check that out. They take multiple forms of cryptocurrency. And to set the stage for tonight, I want to remind everybody, so my keynote talk at Porcfest was about, the idea that the revolution will be tokenized. And this was 2 podcasts ago, what the focus of my content was. And I've been talking about this obviously for years, but people still don't understand tokenization. And in fact, I'm probably going to write a book about it, a short book to try to frame this properly, because it's a misunderstood concept, or it's a concept that's not understood at all. And the reality is that all of commerce runs on centralized databases today. Tokenization is just, in one way, it's the evolution of the database. It's about creating digital tokens that represent either real world assets or contractual rights. But there's a freedom versus tyranny dimension to it. So tokens could either be something that liberates us, or it could be something that enslaves us and is the ultimate tool for technocracy. And so it's important to understand that stable coins and CBDCs are a form of tokenized money, but it's a form of tokenized money that the state and other third parties have control over. And the plan for tokenization from the technocrats doesn't end with just tokenizing money. Their plan is to tokenize our stocks, our bonds, all of our non-monetary assets. So under the technocratic model, everything becomes tokenized, everything becomes centrally programmed, tracked, and censorable. And so the end goal of all of this is a single global digital currency backed by energy credits. This has been the sole function of technocracy, the goal of technocracy, going all the way back to the early 1930s. And so the reason that I talk so often about Zano is that Zano allows you, it's not just a privacy coin that you can use as an alternative to CBDCs or stablecoins. It's a technology that allows you to tokenize other assets and trade those assets privately. So these non-monetary assets. So you can think of, everything from tokenizing land to tokenizing stocks and bonds. Anything could be privately tokenized using Zano. To me, it's the number one technology that we have to counter CBDCs. And so one of my main points in the talk was that we cannot comply our way out of technocracy. There is no voting our way out of this. We need to start adopting other solutions. And so as an example of some of the tokenization projects that you could build, and I put this out there again, I may put this in a book just so that I can start stimulating some thinking about this. You could build an entire healthcare marketplace for medical tourism, where, right now people don't realize it. They pay more for copays and they pay more for premiums than they could pay if they were actually shopping around and going around the globe buying medical services directly for cash. In fact, in many cases, it's 90 to 95% less expensive. And I'm not just talking about cosmetic procedures here. We're talking about heart transplants. I mean, you name the procedure. The example that I brought up, I think last time, was there was someone in California that needed a root canal, and they determined that it was actually cheaper to go to Thailand for an entire week, take a vacation, and get the root canal done in Thailand rather than just pay the copay from their dental insurance. And there are many examples of this. So you could build on Zano a complete healthcare marketplace for medical tourism, complete with a reputation management system. Imagine you're walking down the street and you see your local restaurant or local retailer that you like. Imagine being able to just buy $50 worth of equity in these small businesses where, you end up getting the tokens for those securities in your own possession. You're not dealing with the SEC. You're just dealing outside of the system. This is another option that you have. Or you could imagine using privacy NFTs as a way to gain access to an event. So now you're not even giving all of your information and you're practically giving up biometric information and everything else. If you buy something through Ticketmaster, now you buy a private NFT that gives you access to an event. You can still get in, but you're not sharing that information. Or you could even, this is a little more outlandish, you could crowdfund a lawsuit against Big Pharma, which this is a real application. This is something that I've been talking to a lawyer about, who struggles with, there's a type of financing that you can do for lawsuits. And the challenge is that a lot of organizations won't put up the money because they're afraid of retaliation from Big Pharma, because it's basically, when you use this type of funding mechanism, the investors have to be disclosed. So if you had a way to privately crowdfund a lawsuit, this may be a way to help, balance out and actually provide the right level of funding to go against behemoths like Big Pharma. So anyway, I just want to recap that because it's really important that we understand, and I'm going to start being more concrete about, I think, maybe every episode, talk about a new use case for tokenization so people can start coming up with their own ideas and alternative systems that we can build outside of the technocracy and outside of the existing system. So my main takeaway from my talk was that we need to unite against a common enemy. And this relates to that hijacking Bitcoin panel and basically everything throughout the week. But we need to unite against our common enemy, which is technocracy. So much of crypto is fighting amongst ourselves. Whose crypto is the best? And when you actually take a step back and look at what's going on kind of holistically, there was $27 trillion worth of stablecoin transactions last year. It doesn't matter what your coin is, even Bitcoin, you're not at that level. And the stablecoin, which I'll call a backdoor CBDC now because of this legislation, is growing at a phenomenal pace. So we can't comply our way out of technocracy. We need to never give up on our prisoners of war, and we need to call out bad actors. We tend to, in the liberty space, have this hands-off approach, but the truth is, there are people from the deep state, there are people from the traditional entrenched industries that are coming in and trying to divide and conquer. And I will say, if anything, it's pretty obvious that the liberty community is very easy to divide and conquer. So we need to call out these bad actors. So with that said, a couple more things before we bring on our guest. I've been traveling, as you know, probably, 70-75% of the year. And so I kind of want to take the summer off and regroup, focus on actually doing a lot of interviews and educating people about the Stable and Genius Acts and how these are backdoor CBDCs. Also, I want to gear up and retool the workshops so that they are more effective, so that we can truly onboard people and get them engaging in peer-to-peer digital cash. Actually set up a situation where we're onboarding new consumers and new merchants. And at the end of the process, they're actually making a direct peer-to-peer transaction, because it's very hard to actually get that first transaction done. But the next event that I'm going to be speaking at is going to be at the Peak Prosperity Annual Summit, which is Lake Winnipesaukee. So I'll be there on September the 12th. And then I'm going to be driving overnight. And then the next day I'll be at the Brownstone Institute Polyface retreat at Joel Salatin's farm. And so that's going to be a great event for a couple of days. Dr. Robert Malone's going to be there, Brett Weinstein. I'm doing an interview on the Saturday night. So those are the next big events that I have. So if you reach out to me and you have an event, chances are I'm going to, probably say no, and it's not because I'm not interested in your event. It's because I need a little bit of downtime to get reorganized. So with that said, we're about ready to introduce our guest for tonight, Matt Kim, and I've actually got an interesting way of teeing this up, and it actually ties into Zano. So I know many of you have reached out to me. There was some FUD that was spread while we were at Porcfest last week about there were some people that were claiming that the Zano network had been there had been a privacy breach, and that somehow they were able to deduce whose wallets, who owned what wallets, and it's completely false. This is a very similar FUD to what's happened in the past. So in essence, the one thing you have to understand is that it's a function of the design of all of these, privacy coins, where, you need to use a VPN. So if you're not using a VPN, there still is kind of a metadata issue with respect to using privacy coins. And so the Zano team has been very upfront about the fact that you should use a VPN. I know I've talked about it in the past as well. But what they were trying to claim is, well, they were able to look at this metadata, and because people are staking crypto, they were making the claim that you could figure out, based on the amount of rewards tied to IP addresses, how many coins somebody is likely to have. But the truth is, that's not even true either, because it's not like they were looking at a single IP address. They were looking at a shared IP address that many people may have been using. So it really was a gigantic nothing burger, but it was planted, I believe, intentionally to coincide with Moneratopia. But this ties into the fact that, it's not just Zano, it's also Zcash, it's also Monero. You need to use a VPN. And so with that, it's really at great timing, because Matt Kim is a co-founder of a new VPN project. And if you're not familiar with Matt, Matt is the CEO and co-founder of VPNet, and he's the host of the Matt Kim podcast with over 1 million followers across X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. He leads the Free Thinker Army, a growing movement committed to challenging narratives, questioning everything, and thinking independently. He's known for his logical and fearless commentary, and he's now bringing that mission into tech with VPNet, building tools that defend truth, privacy, and individual freedom. And I encourage you to check out his channel. He's done some really powerful interviews that have really gone viral with people like Andrew Tate and Sean Ryan and everything else. I love his stuff. I actually frequently watch his stuff and was hoping to actually come on his show at some point. And we'd been doing a little bit of back and forth, and so he took a brief hiatus, and it turns out for the last several months has been working on VP.net. So I'm very excited to bring him on. Matt, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Aaron, thank you so much. And for sure, when we have time and you got to come down to Atlanta and you got to come on my show, okay?
Look forward to it. So how have you been? You've been busy.
Yeah, I mean, I spent the better part of the last 2 years doing a lot of political commentary, podcasting. It was never even a plan of mine. It was actually never a goal. Just start talking to the internet. I think like a lot of people watching and listening, you get frustrated with the world around you. You get frustrated with the direction of society. And I just started talking to a camera. And for some reason, people started listening to me, which is amazing. I'm super grateful. But just talking online, it wasn't enough. Had to actually start doing things that I felt like were making a difference. I feel like I spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about politics. And I don't know if politics is the solution to the mess that we're in. I think that technology is going to dictate and decide our future. And I'm really fortunate that in my immediate network, I have just the most amazing, smartest technologists that were able to come up with, just amazing product, and fortunate that they allowed me to be a part of their team.
Well, that's great. So as I said, leading into this, I mean, I've been encouraging people to use VPNs. I've used VPNs myself. I've used Proton VPN. I've used Mulvad. I've used a few of these others. I've always been a little worried about, frankly, Proton Mail, just based on some of the people behind it, and do they have access to my data or not? So what's unique about VPNet? What kind of caused you to go down this new path?
Well, I think privacy is really important. I frame it like this. Privacy is your right to choose what information you share, not to keep the information that they allow. So everything, your data, your information, your thoughts, your research, that actually belongs to you and only you. And somehow in society, in this world, in this new digital age, that's been flipped upside down. So they take all of your information and then they decide what you're allowed to keep, which is actually backwards. It's all yours, it's all mine, and I decide what I want the world to know about me. But somehow that's changed upside down. And we just ran into this new way. I say run into. One of my co-founders, his name is Andrew Lee. He is the original founder of Private Internet Access, PIA. And he came up with a new way to run a VPN. We run all of the network traffic through a hardware secure enclave. Basically what that does is that your traditional VPN is a trust-based system. And that's every single VPN in the world. They are trust-based systems. So the VPN provider has access to your traffic, knows your IP, knows where you're going. And by policy, they say, okay, we won't log it, we won't share it, we won't give it up. If the government or anybody were to subpoena us, we swear we'll do the right thing. There's a lot of problems with that method. Number one is that technology companies, given the opportunity, have compromised their data time and time and time again. Secondly, the problem is even if you registered your company in a country that is not required to give up your data, we're using US servers. Those data centers are still required to comply, especially with something like the Oceans Act, which says that if the government comes and requests the information for the data center, they have to provide it. Just because your company is registered in a non-censorship or surveillance country does not mean that the data center in the United States will not give up the information. Sometimes the company themselves don't even know that they did it.
So to solve this problem, we route all the traffic through a hardware secure enclave, which we ourselves as a VPN provider cannot see inside, meaning we do not have the ability to correlate any traffic. So we can't know what user was going to what website. I think by that, if anyone were to gain root host access to the server, they can't see the information. If a government or an agency were to subpoena us, we have nothing to give. We can't share the information that we ourselves don't have. And that's kind of what this new VPN product is.
That's great. Can you explain a little bit more about how these enclaves work? A lot of the audience here is technical, but some aren't. Can you give a kind of a broader overview of that?
Yeah, so there are these chip manufacturers that create these trusted execution environments. And in doing so, basically what it is like a cryptographic black box within certain processors where they are typically used for very highly sensitive or confidential key signatures. And what we did was we took those really highly sensitive environments and figured out how to route internet traffic. So you can't see inside. We say zero trust VPN, which is true to a certain degree. You have to trust that Intel, because we're using Intel SGX right now, you have to trust that Intel's hardware works as described. But the purpose of it wasn't only VPN, actually network traffic, because we're the first people to do that. We've actually patented the idea of running a network traffic. Actually, the patent is for network anonymization within a hardware secure enclave. But you have to trust that Intel, who does these high key signatures for banks, for cryptocurrency projects, for highly sensitive information, that they're able to provide the environment in which they say.
Well, that's great. So is anyone else doing this, or are you the first and only?
We are the first and only. Again, we have applied for a patent, so the systems architecture is patent pending. And the only reason we did that, we actually wanted to open source the whole thing. The problem is that the VPN providers in the world, especially there's like 4 VPN providers own something like 80% of the market. They have unlimited money, billion-dollar budgets. They would crush us in a day if we didn't do a legal moding. The only way we can make sure that our product gets to market is if we do that a little bit. So we did file a patent for it. It is pending. And as far as we know, I mean, we've done a lot of patent research. We're the only people that have ever done that before.
That's great. So I actually signed up for it a few days ago, I think 3 days ago, and I'm actually running it on a Mac. I'm running it on a tablet. I'm also running it on an Android. And so far, so good. What platforms is VP.net available on currently?
So it's available on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, your Android device, and your iOS device, and iPad. So pretty much all the major ones that you would think of using. We will expand most likely into a privacy browser next. We would love to have a privacy browser that pairs specifically with our VPN to give you ultimate privacy. So that's kind of on the roadmap of something we want to do. And we have some other privacy tools in mind. So our systems architecture and our technology is an anonymization of network activity within an enclave. That technology can actually be used not only for a VPN, it's just our first iteration. We can use that also for currencies and privacy coins, like you were talking about in Zeno, and the fact that people may be able to do some IP tracking. We should be able to hide and anonymize that traffic. Same thing with end-to-end messaging. So if you are using Signal for a communication method, maybe the contents of our discussion are encrypted, but Signal knows that you and I were speaking. And if you guys remember 2 years back, and they were doing these mafia movies and they were tracking who's talking to who, and they sit there and they cover their mouths so that no one knows who is talking to who. It's always the picture of 2 people covering their mouth that ends up in court. It's enough actually for conspiracy, not the contents alone, but the fact that 2 people are talking. And that is something that we can also cover. And the third thing that we'd like to get into that's on the roadmap is how do you anonymize your connections with your AI language models? Because right now everyone's using Google, everyone's using their search browsers, they go over the internet. But the reality is that the future we're going to be communicating with AI more. And right now they know everything that you're doing. Actually, the way the AI should work in the future is that the AI should be able to pump out information and data, and the provider themselves should not know where it's going. So it's just data going out. Why do they have to track exactly who it's going to? So this is the same technology that we can use not only for the VPN, but we can roll out to various iterations.
I would think that Venice.ai would be interested in this. I mean, that would probably be a great place to start, given their focus on privacy, and it's, Eric Voorhees. So I would assume this would be aligned with him. Are there any performance or speed issues with respect to the way that you're doing this? Are there any trade-offs, or is there any downside to it?
The downside is that when you get your traditional VPN, they give you a lot of different services. For example, Nord, they'll do credit monitoring and ID tracking over the internet and things like this. And we stripped all that stuff out because those aren't actually privacy-focused tools. I think it's really odd that a privacy company that's supposed to keep you anonymous on the internet also collects your data for you and they're giving it to them. Actually, it doesn't make any sense. So anything that we consider as to not be ideal for privacy, we have removed. So it may not have as many byproduct functions and tools that maybe some other VPNs have. But I think the trade-off is worth it because our focus is privacy and not different features that you could purchase on your own if you choose to do so.
So there aren't any trade-offs with the way that you do the enclaves with respect to speed or anything like that?
No, we don't believe so. We think that it works pretty well. It's pretty fast. The only downside is that because we are new, we have about 350 plus servers online throughout the world. Probably to get comprehensive coverage, we're going to have to get to a couple thousand. So that is the downside. I think it is that you may not have a server closest to where you currently are. But what we ask is users to send in a message or hit up our support team or leave us a message on Telegram or X and let us know which area that you want a server in. And as the user need grows, we'll just continue to add based on kind of the user experience. But because we are a new VPN, we just don't have as many servers online as maybe one of the ones that are more established.
How strong is the encryption within these enclaves? Is there kind of a comparison?
Yeah, I mean, we use WireGuard and we use their protocol. So it's something that a lot of the VPNs already use. It's actually probably the most popular one. So encryption wise, it's not, we didn't roll our own encryption. So that shouldn't be an issue. It's something that we're using a protocol that people already trust as far as encryption is concerned. What we do is actually we split the traffic and we put all the connections and now route it through the enclave. That's really our differentiating factor.
Got it. So who is your target audience for this? I mean, right now, I know, presumably everybody ultimately, but for, since you just launched, who do you think, what are your kind of target markets for this?
Well, I think the target market are, number one, people who already use a VPN. Because if you use a VPN already, then you're already kind of skeptical of the way that the world is, and you're a little more protective of your information and your data. And if you know that a more private and secure VPN exists, it's really hard not to switch. Because again, we're the only VPN that can't, the tagline is the only VPN that can't spy on you. And what that means is we are the only one that physically cannot see your activity. Every other one can. What they do with it, it's their choice, but you have to trust that they're choosing to do the right thing. And there's a lot of people in that chain that you have to trust. The fact that we cannot see your data, I think that differentiating factor is enough where anyone that's using VPN, for sure, maybe I'm being selfish, but you for sure should switch. And I think people that are more privacy focused, there's a lot of people out in the world that don't like the idea that their data is being tracked, is being monitored, is being saved, that it can be logged. And even if they're not logging, they can log. And that's actually enough.
Yep. Yeah. And what you said about conspiracy, a lot of people are not aware of this. The government has a few tools in their toolkit that just completely violate the Constitution. They can use the Commerce Clause for interstate commerce. They can use and they can use a conspiracy charge. For instance, Ian Freeman, in his case, the jury actually found him guilty of money laundering, but there was no evidence of it. So the judge actually reversed the money laundering charge, but he's the longest part of his sentence is 8 years, and it's for conspiracy to commit money laundering. So it's one of these catch-alls that they're able to use. So this is a really important point about what you said about with Signal. While they can't see the contents itself, they know you had that conversation, and that they will use that against you, and they will leverage that against you. And in fact, I was in a lawsuit where one of the strategies that the government uses is they actually try to say, well, if you used something like Signal, you're kind of presumed guilty. It's kind of you're guilty until proven innocent. The state tries to use this against you, the fact that you even used privacy tools. And so it's really important to have what Matt's describing with VP.net. What is the pricing?
I don't want to get in trouble. I have no interest in fighting with the US government or any government, right? And the reality is that if you have people's information, you have to give it up if they come knocking on your door. We've seen that time and time again with countries or with technology companies all over the world, is that if you have user data and they come asking for it, you actually don't have a choice. When the government shows up with the government gun, they say, give me Aaron's information. You're actually not in a position to say no. The only way to solve that is that you never had it to begin with. I mean, I think a lot about Pavel and Telegram and how he got locked up. And he said, no, I don't want to give up people's IP addresses. Well, he's in trouble because he had them. If he didn't have them, he wouldn't be in the same situation he is today. It's the fact that he had them and tried to refuse to give them up. You can't have the information. This is really dangerous to have. And I think that's why we've architected this VPN to be that way. Otherwise, there's no way I could run a VPN out of the United States and live in the United States, actually. It would be a really dangerous proposition to have because I'd have too many people's information. I wouldn't want to do that. The only reason that it's possible is because we physically do not have your data to ever give up. And that's the only way this thing works. Again, otherwise, there's no way I could do this in this country. It's impossible.
Yeah, and I want to say this is a kind of an analogy here is when you look at privacy coins that are private by default or optional privacy. And I've moved, anyone that's listening to this knows, to privacy by default. And there are all kinds of issues. If you look at what's happened legally with coin mixing services. Look at what's happening with Roman Storm, with Tornado Cash, with Bitcoin Fog. So if you take something that's not private and then you try to add a privacy layer to it, those people get targeted. Whereas if you have something that is private by default, where there's literally no way to unwind the transaction or make it transparent, then those protocols and those technologies continue to flourish, and people aren't in prison for that. So this is a really, really important point. How much does this cost? So if I'm, compared to the most popular VPNs out there, what do you charge for this?
I think we're right on par roughly with what other people are charging. $10 a month, $100 a year, $200 for 3 years. It's comparable. The server cost is a little bit more than your traditional VPN because we do have to use specific servers that have the Intel SGX enclaves. We do have a little more technology that had to go into it, but we're a small team. We do it not because we think it's going to make a ton of money, which maybe it will one day, but we actually care about privacy and we care about society. And we think that is a valuable, necessary tool for the future. I'm in the premise of, if you provide value to the world and you create business that actually helps humanity and creates usable tools, that the money and whatever comes with that will happen naturally as a byproduct. So anytime I think of business, I don't think how do we make money? I think how do we provide value to the world? And I think it's maybe a slower way to go, but I think that's really important, because if you think about how do I make money first, then you're going to cut corners and you're going to make decisions that are help you mission drift from your stated original goal. And we really focus on sticking to our mission, which is that we provide privacy.
Yeah, and we see this time and time again where, we see this certainly in Bitcoin where people kind of lose their way. But if I encourage you to go to vp.net and take a look at the team and who's behind this, this is clearly a group of people that are committed to freedom and committed to privacy. And I don't know if you want to talk more about the team or if not, either way.
No, I would love to plug the team if I could, because I think I have one of the best teams in the world. I think I'm super blessed to just be in their kind of atmosphere. Our CTO is Mark Karpelis from Mt. Gox. And I think he's one of the smartest, talented developers in the world. And he's building and working on our systems architecture. Roger Ver is our senior advisor. He's been advising us throughout the process, helping us navigate kind of this arduous kind of technology that we have to deal with. Obviously, he has a clear understanding of the pitfalls and roadblocks that we're going to see along the way. So having Roger as a part of our team and advising us every step of the way has been invaluable. And, having Andrew Lee, who was the founder of Private Internet Access, who has gone to court and had to go to court to prove several times that they are not logging. I mean, he is a true believer in privacy, and he's built his entire career on it. And to be with those three gentlemen, I mean, I would not have it any other way. I think the most rare thing for a man is to be a part of a business that you actually believe in, you actually care about, to be able to work with people that you actually enjoy, and also be able to make a few bucks doing it. That may be the rarest combination in the world. And I'm super fortunate that I'm able to check all those boxes.
I know that's terrific. I mean, there's no doubt that the people are committed and passionate about what it is that you're building and what you've built. I have a couple of questions that came in from the tweet this morning. So, do you accept cryptocurrency for?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we do accept cryptocurrency. It's kind of in a menu that's we need to redo the menu, but basically we do accept cryptocurrency. It's in a under a heading of non-renewing payment, because it's one time. We don't have a renewal option with the cryptocurrency, so it's hidden under a different menu, but it is there. We currently accept the mainstream kind of traditional tokens, your Ethereum, Bitcoin, Tether, etc. And we are working on a privacy anonymous mode that is on the roadmap. That probably will come out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And the plan for that is that people would be able to play with something like a Zano or an FUSD, and we would give them their tokens back in the payment confirmations, so that you don't have to use an email and you can have a truly anonymous mode. But we are at kind of our first iteration. We just launched 3 days ago, so that's something that's in the roadmap as a quick next update.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think the ability to use Zano or FUSD would be a terrific addition to this.
Yeah, we've been using a lot of FUSD recently, actually. I like it. I like the idea of a privacy stablecoin. It's easy to transact with. And, for what we do, because we have fixed costs, it's been a little more difficult to do something that has a little more volatility. So we have been using a lot of FUSD, and it's something that we plan on implementing in the near future.
That's great. Well, I mean, my audience is going to be familiar with this. I think I've onboarded another 50 people in the last week to FUSD. And so people are excited about the idea of having something that's stable, but also private and not being used to fund U.S. treasuries and used to fund wars all over the world. So very excited to hear that you're going to be adding those. So what's your long-term vision for VPNet?
Well, I kind of alluded to earlier, but it starts with the VPN, but really the technology. We're really a technology company, not just a VPN provider. The VPN provider is just a proof of concept of our technology. So we want to roll into browsers. We want to roll into end-to-end encrypted messaging, how to anonymize those connections between two people. I think that's actually going to be really important in the future. And how to anonymize your traffic with AI and language models. So those are kind of the things that are on our roadmap of what we want to get to. And really the VPN is just to prove the concept, to make sure that it works, make sure that's adoptable. And really the question is do people care? This is a question that we actually ask ourselves all the time, is that we created the most private, secure VPN in the world. Are people going to care? And I don't know the answer to that. In my mind, I'm like, of course people would care. But the market decides what the market decides. Are we so far gone in society that people actually don't care about their privacy any longer? I don't know the answer to that, actually. Maybe you have a better understanding, but I'm really curious to find out like where we are on that. What do you think, actually?
So my
Do
experience,
people actually care about privacy?
So my experience is this. So I've been doing these CBDC workshops around the country and now expanding outside of the US. And it's really interesting because the target audience has not been, who you might think. It's not people that are already in crypto, or it's not people that are already libertarian or ANCAP. The primary target audience has been people that woke up because of COVID tyranny. So these are people that were not previously questioning. They weren't Ron Paul supporters. They weren't looking at the Federal Reserve and talking about end the Fed. So I'll have these workshops with anywhere from 100 to 300 people in them. And interestingly, they're largely boomers. And so this seems a little bit counterintuitive, but they are interested. They are now awake. They are aware of the issues with central banking, and they're looking for solutions. But most of them have never held a cryptocurrency in their life. And so what's interesting about that is going through the process and trying to onboard them. So what the short form of this is that we have this bifurcation where you have a lot of boomers that are concerned about privacy, but they're not very technical. And when I say not very technical, it's been eye-opening for me because I'll bring some of the tech support from the crypto wallets that we're using and promoting. And, they're really not aware of what it's like for a boomer that's not a digital native to use these things. Like they'll look at something like, what's a seed phrase? Why do I need a seed phrase? Like very basic things that if you've been in crypto for a long time, you assume make sense, but they really don't make sense. And if you're speaking to a new audience, actually it's a pretty clunky sign-up process and it's a very clunky UI. So boomers get, and particularly this particular segment of people that woke up because of COVID, are very interested in privacy, but lack some of the technical skills. Whereas, unfortunately, younger people do not seem to value privacy as much or at all. And so while they may have the technical skills, and being able to install wallets or install VPNs is something that is very easy, there isn't so much an understanding of why privacy is important. So it's weird. So what we have to do is kind of bridge the two. We need to explain to younger people why privacy is important, and we need to make the tools easy enough for older people to actually be able to implement. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, there are a lot of people that are interested in privacy, but there are people that are not necessarily native to crypto or tech. And so I think you're going to find that's actually a pretty big audience for you. I mean, you can look at people in the food freedom space, the health freedom space. There are interesting segments, health freedom. If you look at all these different categories where people have been debanked, what I've found is a lot of people in the health freedom area have never used cryptocurrency before. They've never used Bitcoin. They've never used it, but they've been debanked. And so it's now a question of how do you bridge those people into a new system? And as I rework my workshops, I actually want to add VPNs in as part of it. I want to give them a complete integrated solution, as opposed to, here are 10 different tools that they have to try to remember, because then you're going to get either, low participation or people are just going to end up checking out if it's too complicated to use. But I do think people are interested. We just have to solve the usability problem.
Yeah, I think that's a concern because we are getting normalized to living in a surveillance state. We put cameras on our cars. We have cameras in our doorways. We have cameras in the street. We have cameras at the stoplights. And anytime something happens to the world and people feel unsafe and they inject some sort of chaos and they say, hey, we'll figure it out. We got you. We're here from the government. We're here to help. And here you go, more cameras. And we're like, oh, great. Thank you for more cameras. Not realizing that we're just getting more and more into surveillance state. And for young people, it doesn't even bother them anymore. They're so used to cameras being in their face everywhere they go that they don't really understand. But the analogy I give to especially the youngest generation is it's the equivalent of if you're home and people say like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why do I care about my privacy online? I'm not doing anything wrong. If you're home and you're watching a movie and you have strangers staring in your window, going into your house, looking into your house, is that okay? And the reality is that's not. If there are strangers at your window staring in your house, maybe you're doing nothing wrong. Maybe you're just eating popcorn, watching some Netflix. Maybe that's all you're doing. But do you want a stranger at your window watching you all the time? No, that's a violation of your privacy. And people don't understand that as much as they once did. I think the older generation is aware because they actually grew up in a place and a time and age where they had privacy. When you were home and no one knew what you were doing at home. And what you did in your house was up to you and you had the freedom to do what you wanted. There was a time where life was like that. If you want to go into the woods or you want to go have fun with your buddies, that's your time. It was not for anyone to tell you you can or cannot do that, or at least monitor what you're doing. Somehow this idea of surveillance and monitoring of the population has been normalized. And I'm adamantly against that. I have a young daughter. And I do not want her to live in a surveillance state. So can we change the way that technology is going? Can we change the way the world is going? I actually don't think so. But can we create tools to give people an opportunity to escape the surveillance dystopian future that we're going to? Yes, I adamantly do believe that. So I think that's our goal, to create tools to help create this parallel society that we're going to need as we go deeper into this society and livelihood of control.
Yeah, as I said at the very beginning, I don't know if you were on for this, but what I've been fighting for the last 2.5 years is I've been trying to educate people about technocracy versus technology. Mm. A lot of people look at, Elon Musk and Doge and Palantir and these other things as, oh, well, of course, we're just using technology to make government more efficient. But that's not actually the point of what they're doing. Technocracy is an ideology. It's an ideology that does not value property rights. It doesn't value individual rights. In fact, it doesn't even value free will. At the end of the day, the idea behind technocracy is that you have elites picking scientists and engineers who make decisions for people. So so this is literally where you end up with a situation where you have a digital currency that's tied into a social credit system. And so one of the things that bothers me the most about this is a year ago when I was doing these workshops, I had thousands of people, coming into my website requesting these workshops. We had requests all over the place. Everywhere from New Zealand to Silicon Valley. It was all over the place. And people were looking at Klaus Schwab and the UN Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals and the WEF and saying, we absolutely don't want that. And so there was a recognition that this kind of centralized structure and authoritarianism is not the way to go. And people were starting to talk about, how it works in China with the AI and the surveillance cameras and the fact that they have social credit systems that are already implemented, but more at a local level, and a CBDC that started on in 2014 and have already started to roll out. And so people are like, well, we don't want to be like China. So then the election happens, and now all of a sudden, people think that the threat is gone and aren't paying attention to the fact that we've actually implemented Real ID, which is something that was in the works for years. And, they kept on pushing the deadlines. And now they've actually, put Real ID in place. And I think in a handful of states, Real ID is a digital ID. You can actually integrate your Real ID with a Google Wallet or an Apple Wallet. People should be terrified about Palantir because, one of the things that Musk did was, they have an API that allowed Palantir to get access to everyone's IRS records. And now Trump came out a week or so ago and said, we're going to build a database on all Americans and we're going to have Palantir do this. And if you look at the track record of Palantir, it's not great from the standpoint of AI or surveillance in terms of what they've done in military conflicts around the world, working with the CIA, to even working with local law enforcement to try to predict crime and actually getting into the realm of Minority Report and pre-crime. And so, and now we have the Stable and Genius Acts, which are a way of creating a backdoor CBDC by taking stablecoins, which are really popular, with $27 trillion a year and growing in annual transactions, and making them captive to the United States Congress and the Federal Reserve. So then adding all of the Bank Secrecy Act and the Know Your Customer laws and anti-money laundering laws, requiring monthly audits by the Federal Reserve. And more importantly, the reason that they're doing this is because no one wants to buy U.S. Treasuries, and they're going to require that these stablecoins be backed one-to-one by only U.S. Treasuries or dollars. And so I actually look at it as the same people that were actually protesting and studying and getting up to date about what the WEF and the UN were doing 8 months ago are cheering on the very same programs with a different banner on it. And so this is actually the biggest challenge that I see, which is we now have to unwind the fact that people have let their guard down. I'll give one quick example of this. So we have something called suspicious activity reports. And so if you do a transaction with a bank for more than $10,000, there's a report that's automatically sent to the Treasury Department. About 8 weeks ago, the Treasury Department, based on, I think, Trump's immigration policy, decided they really wanted to focus on 30 specific zip codes in California and Texas. And so they changed the threshold from $10,000 to $200. So now if you live in one of those 30 zip codes, if you do a transaction greater than $200, a suspicious activity report is immediately flagged and goes to the Treasury Department. And people were cheering this on. There was no outrage about it. Or you look at health policy with RFK. RFK, came out and said, well, hey, we don't like the fact that food stamps are being used for people to buy sugary sodas. And so we're going to stop that. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, food stamps are basically debit cards that are issued at the state level. And so they're just adding more programmability to the digital money, and the biggest service provider for this is actually JP Morgan. Or now he announced yesterday they're going to be pushing for doing one of the largest, I guess, marketing campaigns in public health history regarding trying to get all Americans to use wearables for tracking their fitness and their various health metrics, which that's a scary prospect as well in terms of government encroachment. So the hardest problem that we have right now is getting people to shift and realize that the people that they thought were white knights are actually implementing. I think, I argue Klaus Schwab probably resigned because he couldn't do in 20 years what the PayPal mafia seems to have been able to implement in the last 6 months.
He's like, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm good to go here. Call it a day. I don't really need to be involved anymore. We got this thing rolling. That's a really scary thought, isn't it? Because, I'm in that group of people that really woke up during COVID. Prior to COVID, I think I just assumed that the world it is, I'm a pretty conservative person by nature. And I was like, okay, like I'm a Republican, sure, why not? I think I pay less taxes if I vote Republican, so I'm going to continue to do that. And, like what could be wrong? Now, I didn't really question. I watched the news. I watched a lot of Fox News. I was like, oh, that must be how the news is because that's my side. And I believe that for a majority of my life, actually. And then when COVID hit, I was like, they're all lying to me. Every single one of them. It actually doesn't matter what side it's on. And it actually doesn't matter who's in charge. The agenda and the direction in which the country is going, which society is going, it goes regardless of who's in charge. And if you look at it, the technocrats that were in charge then are still the people that are in charge now. They actually had no disruption of service, somehow they were on the left and now they're on the right and they were on the left and the right. And, they still are able to go forward with the direction and the plans that they've had. And I think that's why I got more interested in getting involved on the technology side, because I think that's really where the difference is going to be made. I don't think the politics side is really going to change too much. You have to build technologies around you that give you an option to separate from the reality that they're trying to build.
I agree with that. I mean, the answer to the AI surveillance state is privacy. I think it's the only way out at this point, which is why, I've switched to only privacy coins and with an emphasis on privacy by default. And the timing of you coming on today and even launching this product, truly, it couldn't be better just because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there was some FUD spread about Zano, which turned out was just old stuff that had been rehashed. But the moral of the story is, even if you're using privacy coins, you need to use a VPN. And then you get into the realm of, okay, well, which VPN should I use? And then you realize, well, there are actually some issues with the fact that a lot of the popular VPNs actually, they have your information, they have your logs, and it's just you're counting on them. You have to trust that they won't bend to the government or bend to other third parties or importantly, that they aren't hacked, right? That's another, I don't know if we touched on that point, but that's another consideration outside of just them caving to pressure. They also are in a position where they could fairly easily be hacked.
Yeah, and not only do you have to trust providers, but you have to trust all those data center providers that they're using. And you may know the name of the company that you're paying your subscription to, but you don't know who all the data center providers are on their chain along the way. So how do you trust them? And I don't think most companies are intentionally trying to be unsafe. I think they're doing the best they can with what they have, but they're just antiquated, older, previous generation technology. It is what it is. It's time that we move forward and we create new privacy protocols that are more trustworthy. And when I say trustworthy, it's that you don't have to trust it. You should be able to trust the code, trust the hardware. You shouldn't trust some random guy in a random country that you've never heard of to be the keeper of your privacy and your data. I think at this point, 2025, to anyone that thinks that, and I'm pretty sure 99.9% of people that are watching you understand that's insane.
I certainly hope so. Although I do know from time to time, I've experienced this thing where I think every couple of times a week, I remind people not to leave crypto on exchanges, and I put some basic concepts and ideas out there, and nevertheless, I'll find somebody that comes to me and says, "Oh, well, I left my crypto on exchange and I lost half of it." So if you're listening to this right now, I'm going to start being more forceful about this, because we are in a race against time. So that there's no, "Oh, why didn't you tell me?" So I'm not trying to soft sell this anymore. It's you really need to move into privacy coins now, and you absolutely have to use a VPN. If you're not using a VPN, then you're actually missing the plot with respect to privacy coins. I mean, there's no point in having your IP address exposed while you're using these privacy coins. This is a very basic step that you can take. It's not an expensive one. And it's something that you can do right away. And it's really not hard to do. I mean, you literally sign up. I put a link down here at the bottom, bit.ly/ARD-VPNet. If you visit that site, you can sign up for VPNet. It's not complicated. It takes a couple of minutes to get set up. You install an app, you click a button. I mean, there's no real technical challenge to this. But I would say it's something that you want to do now. I mean, sooner rather than later, because time is not on our side for any of this. If there's one takeaway that I could have, I mean, I'm going to be doing a lot of media interviews over the summer and really focusing on explaining what the Genius Act and Stable Act mean, and how people should be really concerned about these stablecoins as a backdoor CBDC. So I want to get the word out about that, because most people, even people in crypto, haven't fully understood. There are a lot of people in crypto that are looking at stablecoins as being a good thing because it's kind of validation for crypto. They're looking at it as personal validation, that, oh yeah, I'm in this space, and now, I was actually on a space today with some people that have been in crypto for a long time, and a guy actually said, look, there are some OGs and some smart people that are looking at this as, well, they're finally getting validation. And I'm like, look, this isn't about, we were all nerds and we were all playing around with computers, and so the whole point of this isn't so that we could get recognized and get invited to the big table and then sell out all of our principles, which seems to be what's actually going on with these stable coins. If we actually want freedom money, then the opposite of freedom money is tokenized fiat that's controlled and regulated by Congress and the Federal Reserve. That couldn't be further from what was in the Bitcoin white paper or the spirit of what cryptocurrency is all about. And so I'm going to do the best that I can to try to spread this message and actually go through and walk through what's actually going on here, because it's terrifying. Had the election gone the other way and Biden or Harris or whoever tried to implement a CBDC from scratch, there would at least be resistance. People would be very skeptical of it. They wouldn't be cheering it on. I mean, how long would it take if you tried to launch a centralized CBDC to get $27 trillion a year in transaction volume? So they're basically capturing something that people are already using and then adding all of the tyranny to it. And so, I'm going to be more clear. You've got to move into privacy coins. You've got to move into VPNs, and we have to start using these technologies for day-to-day transactions, because the way that we escape CBDC tyranny, stablecoin tyranny, whatever you want to call it, is not going to be by voting. You're not going to change Congress's mind. And I'm not going to go through it here, but I can show you why certain congressmen are sponsoring this. I'm not telling you to call your congressman. It's a waste of time. It's unless you've got $1 trillion and you're ready to kind of bribe people with it, you've got no shot. We have to start using alternatives, and privacy coins and privacy tools are really the only way out. And so I just hope we can move quickly enough. And as I said at the outset, one of the problems that we have is that people within crypto are fighting amongst themselves and not understanding that what we are fighting against is actually a technocracy. It is this movement towards centralized digital currencies that are programmable. It's not fighting amongst ourselves. We need all of our solutions to work. We need multiple solutions. Maximalism is something that technocrats do. We need, free market solutions and choice, and we need to kind of be willing to work together, or at least tolerate each other's projects, and not go immediately into a divide and conquer strategy. And so, anyway, that's my rant for today on this.
Yeah, I like cryptocurrency for the promise of what it was supposed to be, which was the ability to have commerce and trade without the government taking their government cut, to be able to have commerce and trade without anyone telling you what you can do with your money. That was the purpose. And somehow we've gotten to this world of when Moon, when Lambo, and it's all speculation. And the point of most cryptocurrency projects is how do we extract the value from the people that support us? And I think that's a scary road to go down, because if we're a society of every business is just trying to take from you, there's going to be nothing left to give. The best businesses in the world, I believe, are ones that give value, not take value. So if you run into a company or a project or a business that is giving value to you, to your world, to your society, to the future, I think those are the ones that you have to support. And that's not only for businesses, but even people online and influencers and commentators and podcasters. Support the ones that give value, because giving value is actually much more difficult and rare. Value is in scarcity. And the ones that are willing to give selflessly, those are the ones that you support. And the ones that are always trying to take from you, they're a dime a dozen. They're going to be here today, be gone tomorrow. I don't really want to get mixed up with those types of groups or companies or businesses any longer,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, even if you look at Bitcoin, I mean, people will say that it's freedom money, but the whole point of it was to be freedom money for everyone. It was supposed to be something that anyone anywhere in the world could use for voluntary exchange. And now it's become something that I like to say is, early on, people in Bitcoin looked at central bankers with disgust, and now they seem to look at them with envy. Now they seem to be, so freedom money now means, well, yeah, we're still going to have a pyramid. It's just that we're going to be at the top of the pyramid. And we no longer care about whether or not the fees are too high or whether or not people can use this currency for trade around the world, even though 71% of people globally make less than $10 a day. We don't care about those people. It's freedom money for us. It's freedom money for, a couple of thousand people. And the world is going to be a pretty bad place if we are, constraining people's freedom and ability to voluntarily interact.
Yeah, I think that, we celebrate as society, celebrate these banks doing these strategic reserves of Bitcoin, and it's a store of value and no one wants to use it. And it's actually almost unusable as a currency any longer. And it is very anti to what the original purpose was. I like the idea of just using it as currency. And the fact that Bitcoin is almost unusable as an actual currency, it kind of makes me sad.
Well, it makes me sad too, but it also worries me because I've seen 3 different occurrences in the last 90 days where people have come to me looking for help because they're in a legal situation, either a dispute with a business partner or a dispute with they're in a divorce. And it turns out now with chain analysis, they're basically building a database of all Bitcoin transactions. It's not just for whales. I mean, they're basically consolidating information from exchanges. And every time there's a big bust, they're trying to find the counterparty. So you may have done a peer-to-peer transaction and never touched a centralized exchange, but if you did something with somebody that was shut down by the government, it's conceivable that that information was turned over as part of the criminal prosecution. And so all of that is being pooled into a central database. And now there are private investigators that actually get certification in Chainalysis. So there are people that are in the middle of a divorce that are just hiring private investigators, and those private investigators now have this, Chainalysis certification and have access to these tools. So they can take one public key and they can derive a significant portion of all of your transactions. I mean, there was one case recently where they were able to find more of this person's Bitcoin transactions than from the bank, because at least the bank, only keeps these records for 7 years. Everything is available with Bitcoin. And so people need to understand this. And I'm going to try to do I know one of these cases, I don't know if it's the Tornado Cash case or Bitcoin Fog or one of these others, but in the discovery process, they're requesting information about how Chainalysis works and trying to understand and be able to kind of reverse engineer what's going on with that process. But I think once people see what's going on with that, they're going to be absolutely horrified about how completely transparent, not only transparent Bitcoin is, but how it's not just government actors you need to worry about. It's anyone. And look, we're even seeing this. It's not, even if you're not a libertarian or someone who supports minimal government, there is a personal security aspect to this that people need to consider. I think a few weeks back there was video footage of the daughter of a crypto CEO that they were trying to abduct. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of hostage and ransom cases related to cryptocurrency. Even when Ross Ulbricht, somebody donated $31 million to him, and so he's had to beef up his security. When he goes to these events, I was kind of hoping he'd hang out at Porcfest or hang out at FreedomFest. He comes into these events and he actually has security, and he comes in and he leaves. Right. And so now, now it's a whole security thing, because now everybody in the world knows he received a $31 million Bitcoin donation. So you actually have to worry about your physical security, your personal safety. You have to worry about, anybody getting access to your financial transactions, not just what the government might do today and certainly will do in the future. So I hope we can articulate better. I hope I can do a better job of articulating why this is important for people of all ages, because it isn't just some ideological battle or some fight over some theoretical right. There are real world immediate consequences to having all of this information transparent. All right. So, all right. Well, is there anything I left out? Is there any big missing pieces here about VPNet that you want to share?
No, I mean, I just hope everyone watching, listening, supports our project. It is something that we are extremely passionate about, something that we believe in. We think that, again, privacy is a right. It's a God-given right, and you should have full control of your own information, your thoughts, your ideas. The privacy is, I think about it like this. Your internet search history and what you do online is actually the most private thing that you have. If I know what you're doing in your browser, I know what business you're about to do. I know what business you're in. I know what cars you like. I know what food you like. I know where you're going to eat. I know where you're going to shop. I know what your girlfriend likes. I know what your wife likes. I know what your kids like. I know where you're going to go on vacation. I know how many people are going to go on vacation. I know where you want to go on vacation, but you can't afford to go on vacation. I know what car you want to buy. I know you. I know what your kinks are. I know you better than probably your best friend if I have access to that information. I think it's important to protect that, because there's no way that you should allow a stranger to have that much information without you giving permission to do so. So if anyone's out there who wants to support what we believe in, definitely go check it out. We appreciate that. And, I think it's really important to support the people that you believe in. If you're watching and you want to do something, I think the best thing you do is to share Aaron's show and let people know, hey, I got this guy that I really believe in his messaging and his words. And if you share Aaron's show, I think that's the best way to help you out. So I believe in that you take care of the people that align with your mission and your ideology.
Yep. Well said. I agree. Definitely share this episode and again, I would say, try this out. I would try out. It's not expensive to try out this VPN. If you're not using a VPN, you need to be using one, immediately. But again, privacy is our last line of defense here. And again, the speed with which the surveillance state is expanding is absolutely mind blowing. And I thought, I was at this event. I mentioned earlier on that I'm going to be speaking at Peak Prosperity. This is Chris Martins's event, and last year he had this thing where he had people stand in line, and based on what they thought the probability was of certain events occurring based on the election. And so one of the questions was, well, do you think we'll have a CBDC if Harris is elected versus Trump? And when it was Harris, it was almost everybody was in the 95 to 100%. Yes, we're going to get a CBDC. But when it was asked about Trump, it was the reverse. It was my wife and I were the only ones that were at kind of the 100% category, and almost everyone was at 50%. Or below. And this is a group of people that, these people are already very awake. I mean, the fact that they're, following Chris Martinson and attending a retreat in New Hampshire to talk about these kinds of things. And so that was really eye-opening to me. And so we've got our work cut out for us, because what's actually already taken place dwarfs what I think Biden or Harris could have done, not out of intent, but out of incompetence. I think if I look back at the Biden administration, I mean, if you look at why people like Ian Freeman and Roger Ver and Roman Storm are in the situation that they're in, it's because Biden passed an executive order that authorized a CBDC and at the same time authorized a complete full government crackdown on crypto. So this is where we got the SEC enforcement. This is where we got, the CEO of Binance. I mean, his $4 billion settlement was the largest settlement in the history of the Treasury Department. This is where you got all the debanking. All of this emanated from this one executive order. So Biden was great at lawfare, but he was completely ineffective at actually pushing and implementing a CBDC. Now we have a situation where it's not so much that we're dealing with lawfare now, although Trump has not ended the war on crypto. We still have our political prisoners. And so while he declared the war on crypto over, if you had a case, and he's done that largely, if you were, Hawk Tuah girl, you had something in front of the SEC, but if you had a big criminal case in front of the DOJ, all of those cases are still largely ongoing. But he's not, they're not pushing forward on new criminal cases or necessarily new lawfare, but they are implementing technocracy at a much faster pace because of the alignment of the PayPal mafia and the influence of people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Palantir, and all of these people within the administration. And so people should be more alarmed about that than they are. Although I will say people are waking up. I have noticed in the last couple of weeks, there's a lot more skepticism now about Palantir. I think when Trump came out and said, we're going to build a database on every American, and then, said we're going to have Palantir do it. Now people are looking at, oh, well, let's look at Palantir's track record. And so people are sharing those clips. And so people are starting to wake up on that. And maybe this turns out to be a good thing. Maybe this will help stimulate people to start actually taking direct action and realize, hey, if I thought I was voting against all of this and instead I just got a hyper dose of it, maybe I should seek alternatives other than voting. So I think that's the best we can hope for at this point.
Yeah, I remember it was the day before election, and I called a friend of mine, and I said, Johnny, Trump's going to win tomorrow. He said, how do you know? I was like, oh, I believe 100% in my soul that Trump's going to win tomorrow. And the reason that I believe so is because the day before the election, Palantir jumped up something like 25%. I said, as soon as I saw Palantir jump up 25% before the day before the election, I'm like, the market knows. The market knows, the technologists know, they know what's about to happen, and for sure he's going to win. And of course, Palantir went on that crazy run that first week of November, and people didn't realize it. people didn't see what was going on, and they were doing their advertising. They were at the football games, and they were taking all the pictures, the videos in front of all the Palantir commercials. And people were like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And I was talking about it. Everyone's like, "Matt, you're crazy. You like hate Trump now, and you're so against everything that you said you believed in." But like, I can't unsee what I saw, which is as soon as he's about to win, everything associated with that technocracy just trends in the direction. I'm like, you can't hide patterns. It is what it is. And do I think that they are intentionally doing it? I don't know. Intent is the hardest one for me to figure out. Are they intentionally rolling this out, or is technology heading in a direction in which case it's almost unstoppable and this is just a natural course of where technology is going to take us? I struggle with that one, to be honest.
I don't know
whether or not they're intentionally doing this.
To me, it does seem intentional. So when you study the technocracy movement itself, and I encourage everybody to read Patrick Wood, who's actually been studying this technocracy movement for over 40 years now. And what you'll find is that, for instance, Elon Musk's grandfather was the head of the Technocracy Party in Canada. Musk has on 3 separate occasions stated on X that Mars will be a technocracy. So there's no like confusion about whether or not what he's talking about is the application of technology just to make things more efficient, or whether he's actually supporting technocracy, which is a completely different ideology. And it's an ideology that has, very specific, it's a very deterministic ideology. It's one that is very much anti-free will. And when you then look at Peter Thiel and some of his, I mean, look, I won't go into all of this now, but I actually look at Yuval Harari and Curtis Yarvin as being, 2 sides of the same coin. They're both pushing different forms of authoritarianism and people giving up their own agency. And at the end, both end up in the same place, which is giving up your agency to technocrats. And so I think this is the driving force behind these movements. And so Peter Thiel is a big supporter of this. J.D. Vance was handpicked by Peter Thiel. J.D. Vance worked for Peter Thiel, and then Peter Thiel invested in his fund. Peter Thiel was the largest donor to J.D. Vance's Senate campaign, and then Peter Thiel actually introduced Trump to J.D. Vance. And so if you look at actually how this is lined up, it's pretty overt. And a lot of people said that, Trump's first term, people like to make a lot of excuses for Trump. And what they like to say was, well, he surrounded himself with bad people. He surrounded himself with, DC swamp creatures and people who were career bureaucrats. And so he didn't do that this time. This time he surrounded himself with technocrats. And I would argue that that's actually much, much worse. So I don't think this is the inevitable conclusion or direction of technology. I've actually seen and shared clips of Peter Thiel. You can actually see these people in their own words talking about what they believe in terms of technocracy. And so I think it very much is being pushed and it's being directed. And that's unfortunate. Again, do I think Trump is a technocrat? Do I think Trump is sitting there, pulling the strings saying, "Oh, gee, I want to push technocracy"? No, I think that he's been sufficiently persuaded. But there's an interesting point about this. I spent a lot of time in political activism. I spent 20 years in this. My stepmother was heavily involved with the Republican Party. She actually started out at a low level in Florida and ended up being the co-chair of the RNC and was actually Trump's ambassador to Costa Rica during his first term. And so I got to see the Republican Party up close. And one thing is there was a huge disadvantage that the Republicans had. When Obama won in 2008, he won largely because they did a better job of building a voter database and using technology to target voters and then starting to incorporate AI with that. And the Republican Party was really far behind. So it almost didn't matter who the candidate was. I mean, the Democrats could have elected a ham sandwich just simply based on the fact that voters are low to no information. And when I say that, I think it's something like only two-thirds of Americans can't even identify the 3 branches of government. That's actually the level of knowledge that we're at in terms of the population. So the Democrats had this much better targeting apparatus. And one of the reasons why Trump was able to upset and overcome the technological advantage is because he actually got help from Palantir in 2016. So I think it's conceivable that in 2024, you had Musk putting in a whole bunch of money to get out the vote. I wouldn't be surprised if Musk wasn't working with Palantir as well, because the amount of information that you can get. So I ran a super PAC in New Hampshire. I could license from this company, Labels and Lists, L2 Technologies. I licensed a database in New Hampshire where I had 300 or 400 data points on every registered voter in the state. And it told me everything from their magazine subscriptions to how many kids they had, the estimate of income, and where they ranked from 0 to 100 on a whole bunch of different policy related issues. And so I paid like $14,000 for that. So to give you a sense of how much data has been aggregated. And of course, they're pulling the data from multiple different sources. So the amount of information that I think the public would be shocked just to learn what these political consulting firms have by way of information on each individual in this country.
Yeah, it's a scary thought to know how much they're actually collecting on us, what they have. I remember on Inauguration Day, watching the inauguration, and you had Bezos and Musk, Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg, and they were sitting front row in front of his cabinet. It's almost like they were telling you exactly what you're about to go into. I mean, that was a conscious choice. They spent hours deciding who sits where. And their conclusion after all their debate and discussion was, let's put the technologists up front. And I mean, it's almost like they were telling us, signaling to us exactly what their plan was.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the case. And so again, is Trump, I don't think Trump's in on it. I think that Trump's, kind of being duped by it. But I'm not trying to defend him one way or the other.
No,
because I don't think he should be defended. What happened to the buck stops here? I mean, that clearly hasn't happened. But nevertheless, we should be worried about the fact that the technocrats really are largely in control of everything that's going on right now. And so again, you aren't going to vote your way out of it because you have, both sides of the government. It's, as you said earlier, it doesn't matter who wins. You're still going to have technocracy. Technocracy wins every election, no matter who's in office. And I don't see that letting up. So this is why we really have to double down on the privacy front.
I agree.
All right. Well, usually, some people, and you don't need to stick around for this. Oftentimes, people kind of jump in and we just have a basic conversation about any of a number of different things that can go on for a long time. Although I don't know if many people are going to show up for that tonight. It was somewhat late notice for me to promote this show. But if you have any last words, please share. Please share them now. And
well, I think that the direction of society is in a place where we have to actually be bearers of our own futures. I think that we are heading into a place where it's easy to get comfortable. I think that change and improvement in the world around us requires sacrifice. I think that we have to be ready to sacrifice for our future generations. I do believe that. And if that means that we have to give up certain luxuries, because what they're going to do is they're going to take, it's what they did. That's what they did during COVID. It's what they always do. It's always the plan, is that they take all your rights, and for ones that comply, they give them back to them. And if it means that if you want to change and you want societal change, it means you have to be okay with not getting some of the luxuries and privileges back that they take from you. And I think part of it is just being prepared for that, because it is going to come a day where reckoning is going to come. And I hope enough people stand strong, because when it comes, I mean, the people who actually believe in freedom and liberty and the betterment of society, we're going to have to stick together.
Yep, I couldn't say it better. And I will say, Porcfest was actually a good good sign of things to come. It's a shame you couldn't make it, and I understand why you couldn't. But I really do feel like people are galvanizing around privacy coins, and so much happened at Porcfest early on in 2012 and 2013. This is when a lot of OGs were introduced to Bitcoin by people like Roger Ver and Eric Voorhees, and started to use it for its intended case. And now people are taking up the privacy coin mantle. And so, I mean, all of Porcfest, everywhere you go in Agora Valley, people are now taking privacy coins, and people were talking about privacy coins. And, you know, our tent, we were one of the large sponsors, and then the tent across the way was sponsored by Edge Wallet and Pirate Chain. And so, but we're all friends, and everybody, you know, works together and, you know, uses each other's coins. There's no maximalism. There really is a sense of projects in the privacy space recognizing that we do have this common technocracy threat. So if, to the extent that Porcfest is a leading indicator, I actually think I'm pretty optimistic about that. And again, I think Porcfest led the way with early Bitcoin adoption, and hopefully we're now starting to see early adoption of privacy coins. And so hopefully this continues, and hopefully people recognize that if you're using privacy coins, you need to use a VPN, and that, you know, we're starting to finally build a movement that can counter this technocratic elite that has no interest in us continuing to have free will.
Amazing.
All right. Well, if there isn't anything else, I guess I will wrap it up for tonight. I'll give people a couple of more minutes if anybody wants to join on. Usually there are one or two people that want to come on and talk, but I think that it was probably too late with the notice today. But you know, we do have 5,000 people live, so this was actually a pretty good turnout. I know at least one guy in the comments said that he's switching from ExpressVPN right now. So we hope to see more of that. And by the way, let me know what you think. I mean, I'm using it right now on my computer that we're live streaming from, and so far I've had no issues with it at all. Very simple to set up, and I encourage others to try it out. Again, bit.ly/ARDVPNet. Please check out that link, and you can go to vp.net and learn all about the technology, all about the team. And so, you know, again, you know, be safe, be private. And I hope everyone takes what we're saying here seriously about not only the threat of technocracy, but the importance in taking action, personal action outside of voting in these other systems.
Perfect.
All right. Well, have a good night. Thanks for coming on, and look forward to chatting with you soon.
Hey, everybody.
As a technocrat, let's dive in. In the early 20th century, a movement began to develop around a political theory known as technocracy, a system wherein management of governments is handled by technical experts, often involving technology-focused solutions. Early proponents of technocracy claimed that the concept would lead to better management of resources and the protection of the planet. However, this system of governance by technological experts and their technology would also involve a loss of privacy, as well as centralization of power and the management of all human behavior. Although the term appears to have been largely forgotten, the technocratic philosophy and influence can be seen everywhere in our modern digital world.
Already beginning to arrive at the huge civic auditorium, where a large receptive audience turned out to hear Howard Scott as he warned of an impending crisis in America's domestic and foreign affairs.
One of the most influential proponents of technocracy was a man named Howard Scott, a writer who founded the Technical Alliance in New York City in 1919. Scott believed that business owners lacked the necessary skills and data to reform their industry, and thus, control should be handed over to engineers. The technocrats publicized their vision of a centrally planned world via books, speeches, clubs, and political parties. This resulted in a brief period of popularity in the US and Canada in the years following the Great Depression. As politicians and economists searched for a solution to the financial calamity, the technocrats imagined a world where politicians and business owners were replaced with scientists, engineers, and other technical experts who would manage the economy. However, in the 1940s, mainstream interest in the technocracy movement seemed to dissipate. The ideas that underpinned the technocratic vision received a notable endorsement in 1970 when political scientist Zbigniew Brzezinski released his book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Brzezinski will be familiar to long-term researchers of the ruling elite. Until his death in 2018, Brzezinski was a diplomat who ran in the same circles as David Rockefeller and former Secretary of State and accused war criminal Henry Kissinger. Brzezinski served as advisor to several presidents, from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama. He was also a member of the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Although Brzezinski's book Between Two Ages substituted the term technotronic for technocratic, the depiction of the future is the same: a world in which the scientific and technological elite centrally plan the lives of all humanity. Essentially, Brzezinski's vision is a technologically advanced, authoritarian-style collectivism wherein individual liberties are subordinated to the apparent needs of the collective. When we examine the world of 2025, we clearly see the signs of technocratic influence. For example, we can see this influence in the wealthiest companies and the most influential CEOs. These individuals are running companies that have amassed large amounts of financial wealth as well as unfathomable amounts of digital data on all of their customers. From Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Bill Gates of Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, we can see the technocratic ideology. These men and their colleagues in various technological industries wield immense power through their companies, wealth, and cultural influence. These individuals have enough money, resources, and connections to shape elections, geoengineer the climate, and cause dips in the stock market, to name a few examples. They are the technocratic class of 2025.